Welcome back to another episode where I am sharing about some of my favorite authors. Today, I want to talk about Jane Austen. Jane Austen actually wrote many books, though she is most famous for Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and Emma, which are actually my favorites of her books. But what I always loved about Jane Austen was her ability to surprise you. She always tells a very human story, and that means that everything doesn't necessarily wrap up in a nice, neat bow. As you read her stories, you think it's going to go this way, and then suddenly there's some huge roadblock that you didn't see coming, and now everything changes. And you go, oh, okay, now we're going this way. And that can even happen several times in her stories until you finally find your conclusion. Where things end is always better than that first path you thought you were going on. And you were happy with that first path, but then she finds something better. They never end the way that you think they're going to, but they do end happy. And as I said, they do end, I think, even better than what you're expecting when you originally start reading it. And I think that is awesome. If you're not sure if you're ready to tackle the more old-fashioned language that she uses, I would recommend starting with some of the movies. There is a movie out there for every one of her major works. Of course, I would recommend the 1995 miniseries of Pride and Prejudice. Do love this version of Sense and Sensibility with Kate Winslet and Emma Thompson, who actually wrote the screenplay for it. If you didn't know, Clueless is based on Emma, let alone that there is more than one version of Emma out there. Those are her most famous pieces, but you can find even others, Northanger Abbey and Mansfield Park, for example. They're out there. You just got to look for them. But I do highly recommend them, especially if you love a good happy ending, unexpected happy endings. The last thing I want to say about Jane Austen is one of the reasons that I love her style is because I just feel like, well, that is how God works in our lives. We can have ideas of what we think is going to be our happy ending, and sometimes maybe that is the case, but often what ends up being the case is God has his plans, and so instead of going this way, we hit a roadblock and find ourselves going another way, and maybe even are disappointed when we start, but it always ends better if we're in his will. And as I read Jane Austen, I see that. I don't know if that was ever Jane Austen's intention, but that is what I see when I read them. Her characters, as I said, are very human. They're very real, flaws and all, even the heroines. And so it can be very easy to connect with her stories. Again, highly recommend really anything by Jane Austen, but yes, most especially Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and Emma, and you can find them without question at your local library.